I'm used to the climate. I think that if man ever found a place to live easy and happy, that Eden is on Puget Sound. Eden is on Puget Sound. That Eden is on Puget Sound. A place to live easy and happy. That Eden is on Puget Sound.
Hello, you are listening to the Seattle Files. My name is Chris Allen, I'm your host. On each episode of this show, I get together with a different local comedian, and together we discuss the strange, unusual, interesting, and oftentimes lesser-known aspects of our local history. Joining me today in the program is Michael Draper. How's it going, Michael?
It's going great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Michael is a local improviser and sketch artist around town. He performs with the groups Kangaroo Court and Always Be Clothing. He does shows at Jet City Improv sometimes. He is also one of the panelists on the now defunct podcast Rounders Roundup.
Whoa, defunct?
Is it? Oh, are you still recording?
We're in between seasons 1 and 2. It's been a few years, but yeah.
Okay, all right.
We're all hopeful that we're going to come back.
Rounders Roundup is they watch Rounders every week.
I hate to correct you right off the top, but we talk about Rounders every week.
Oh, okay.
We are beholden to never watch it again. So
really?
We're only talking about our memory of the film.
Okay, interesting. I'm sorry to have messed that up.
That is quite all right. It is a very dumb idea, but I love it. It is on iTunes if you want to check that out.
Rounders Roundup. Check it out on iTunes. How long have you lived in the Northwest, in the Seattle area?
In the Northwest, about, now I have to do math, 20 years.
Okay.
Just about. When I was 8, we moved to the Bellingham area. I lived in Ferndale for about 10 years. And then I went to college here at the University of Washington. And just stuck around.
Okay, cool. So, where were you at before you were 8?
I lived in Southern California for a few years, and then we moved to Ohio for 2 years to learn that wasn't our jam.
Yeah. Is that what you said when you were 6?
When I was 6 to 8,
this ain't my jam.
I was like, this ain't my jam. Let's go somewhere else. And my father's work agreed and relocated him here.
Awesome. How much do you know about local history?
I love local history. I wish I knew more.
Okay.
I know that I was required at one point to take a local history class, but I don't think my teacher was too great, and so...
Yeah. Do you remember much about that?
No.
Yeah, I don't remember anything from Pacific Northwest history at all.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, it's too bad. Do you know anything about Eastern Washington?
No.
Okay,
well, it's boring to drive through.
You're going to, because this story takes place pretty much entirely in Eastern Washington.
Ooh, boy.
Yeah. Thanks to David Honeycutt for this topic suggestion. If you have a topic that you would like to hear an episode about, shoot me an email at theseattlefiles@gmail.com. So, you ready to get started?
I am so ready.
Awesome. October 29th, 1929. The U.S. stock market plummeted, and investors lost $40 billion. Black Tuesday.
Wow.
It's now called.
$40 billion?
$40 billion.
In today's dollars.
That's more.
That's even more.
Yeah, that's...
Probably billions.
I'm going to guess that $40 billion in 1929 in today's dollars would still be billions.
At least.
Yeah.
Billions.
Black Tuesday, it was the start of the Great Depression, and by 1932, stocks were trading at an average of 20% of their pre-Black Tuesday value. Yeah. 1934, things got worse, and a series of droughts plagued the American heartland. Fields stopped yielding crops due to lack of water, and livestock died because there was nothing to feed it with.
Wow.
The big dust bowls happened.
That is real bad timing for a weather.
Yeah, it's a 1-2 punch.
For sure.
In Fort Worth, Texas, 600,000 head of cattle were shot to prevent them from starving to death.
Wait, head of cattle, is that the unit?
That's a unit of cattle.
Is one cattle a head?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not like a head of cattle, it's 4 cattle.
I'm not a farmer, I don't know.
They've got like 6 stomachs, so I don't know how many heads they have.
So 1 head of cattle equals 6 stomachs?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How much would that be? How much would 600,000 be in stomachs of cattle?
3.6 mil.
That's,
stomachs.
Yeah. Nailed it.
My cow conversion is, top notch.
Yeah.
World class? Who's to say?
Dry dirt created dust storms that seemed to cover the whole country. Food riots broke out in major cities and were dispersed by riot police.
Yikes.
Millions of farmers across the country abandoned their farms, many of which they'd been on for generations, and headed to the west coast where there's the promise of rain. Many of which flocked to the young city of Spokane, which in 1935 had about 120,000 people living in it and billed itself as the Queen City of the richest empire in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow. What would the richest empire in the Western Hemisphere?
I guess
just
it's
the Pacific Northwest.
Washington, the Pacific Northwest.
That's great.
It's a bold claim. It's quite a bold claim.
It's quite a bold claim. I actually went to Spokane for the first time recently.
Oh yeah?
A great laser tag place right in the middle of downtown.
Laser Quest?
Yes.
David Honeycutt works at that Laser
What?
Quest. The
Oh
guy
my
that was
gosh.
just- yeah.
That is amazing.
No joke. He's a friend of mine. He does improv. And he's come out here a couple of times.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's so funny that you that's so random you mentioned that.
It's like my favorite thing in Spokane. There's a lot of great stuff in Spokane. They got the giant wagon thing, but laser tag.
Incidentally, Laser Quest, that company, I worked for that company for 2 years in high school at their Federal Way location.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do they still have a Federal
They
Way?
still have a
What?
Laser Quest in Federal Way.
I know what I'm doing immediately after this.
Going down to Laser Quest?
Yes.
Let's do it. I will crush you.
I'm going to crush all the middle schoolers
Yeah,
that are already
pretty much.
there.
Yeah. So many wished to journey to Spokane, which was believed to be doing better than many places in the Depression, that 150 people died trying to hop onto an overbooked train heading there in 1935.
Oh, wow.
So Spokane is such a crazy, great destination. People die trying to get on trains heading to Spokane.
Good Lord, that means it, fell out, tipped over or something? Like, it must have been an incident.
My guess is that they were all, overboarded, like you see the trains in, Asia and India, where people are just kind of hanging off, but there was some kind of a disaster and people
Yeah.
flew off.
That's no joke about that.
No. The food shortage meant that some students would hustle their way into Washington State University by paying their tuition with food. So a dozen jars of fresh peaches would get you a semester of college.
Wow. I don't know the peach exchange.
We'll put that, UW, put that into your back pocket when you're trying to make fun of WSU.
Oh yeah, the Great Depression was so hard on your school that just 12 jars of nonsense would get you a BS degree. Sorry, I went to UW. I gotta still take shots.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, Spokane, though, was no utopia, and was being hit by drought and famine just like the rest of the country. Stores had closed, many were homeless, and the zoo shut down and gave away the animals.
There is a scene that I would love to see pictures of.
Yeah, in researching this story, every so often I come across a sentence and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any goddamn sense. Everything else is fine, but, that, and then the research just moves on from there. I'm like, what the, I need to, okay. Make a note of that, come back to it later.
You just some neighborhood near the zoo, and there's just zebras running around.
Yeah, or zebra meat.
Ooh.
Yeah, giraffe burgers.
Now you got me thinking.
Yeah.
Penguin burgers, I've always been curious.
Oh, yeah. Puffins are supposed to be really delicious, and that's like a penguin.
I was just in Iceland.
Did you eat puffin?
I almost did, but I got talked out of it. It was on the
Oh,
menu
really?
of a place I was.
Why'd you get talked out of it? Because they're adorable?
It was just a weird... My wife, not to put her on blast, but she didn't want to eat the weird stuff.
Okay.
I ate a little bit of whale. I didn't eat any shark.
Oh, really? Interesting. What'd you think of whale?
It was smoked. It was almost like a beef.
Okay.
So it was fine.
Interesting.
That's meat, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm definitely going to go back, eat some puffins, and see some puffins.
Yeah.
I wanted to see it first before I,
And be like, I'm gonna eat you later, asshole. You can be a Torval all you want, but I'm gonna chew on you.
Yeah.
August 1935, a newspaper headline in the Spokane Chronicle read, "Spokane butter shortage looms." And the price of butter hit 40 cents a pound, over $7 in today's money, and double what it had been the year before.
Yikes.
The price of butter doubles. There was a saying that developed around the time and was common during the Depression: an empty stomach does not recognize the law.
Yeah. Was there an actual butter shortage that then happened at that point? Or?
There was a major butter shortage. Because remember, they don't have crops because of the drought,
Right.
and so they can't feed the cows, and so the cows aren't producing milk. So the price of the supply drops way down, and so the price of butter goes up, and there's this huge butter shortage, and if you want butter, it's super expensive.
That makes total sense. I studied economics, so
Yeah.
I should know this.
So does that add up?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
All the things add up.
Good. Bill Parsons became a beat cop in Spokane during the Depression in 1935. He had previously been a railroad worker and firefighter in Idaho. When he joined the police force, he did not attend a police academy and did not receive much training in local law.
So they were just accepting anybody.
Well, it was really competitive to become a cop because there were no jobs. Everybody was looking for work. But apparently once you got on the police force back then, they were just like, well, come on up. Here's your gun and badge. Off you go.
You were a firefighter somewhere? That's close enough.
Yeah, you wore a uniform. You know. The most common crime he dealt with, unsurprisingly, was vagrancy, a charge that carried with it up to 6 months in jail.
Wow.
Another law he enforced was the law against free assembly and speech. Unique to Spokane at the time, and coming to a head in 1908 during a massive protest by the industrial workers of the world.
Yeah, I'm no constitutional specialist, but law against free assembly and speech?
Yeah, there were laws against free speech on the streets.
Ooh, good job, Spokane.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about that, there's a whole episode about the industrial workers of the world that talks a little bit about that. But yeah, laws against free speech.
Cool. And vagrancy, that's just people being vagrants?
Vagrancy, yeah. Vagrancy is kind of just a catch-all so you can get people to not hang out here or there or just standing around in the streets. Like if you go to public parks and you see signs that say no loitering, that's so they can kick homeless people out.
Right.
Because that's what you do in a park. You loiter, you hang out, you eat, you lay around, whatever. But they want to be able to kick homeless people out. So they say no loitering. Yeah.
So this police officer we're talking about maybe doesn't have the best intentions at heart.
Well,
he's enforcing
he does have the best intentions right now.
Okay.
He's on the up and up. He's optimistic and idealistic. He's young.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's tough times.
It's tough times. It's tough times all around. And so he's supposed to be enforcing these laws against vagrancy and not letting people like sleep out on the streets and things like that. But there's huge homelessness issues and people are out of work. People are hungry. So it's a tough situation for everyone.
Yeah.
The city could not afford to house and feed all the arrests that were being made, and it became much more common for police to simply extort a bribe from a suspect and send them on their way. An official estimate stated $100,000 a year was being made by corrupt officers in the Spokane Police Department during the Depression.
Wow. But like how many jars is that of jam?
How many jars of jam is that? It's a lot of jars of jam.
Okay.
That'll probably pay everybody's tuition at WSU. Yeah, and $100,000 during Depression, that's over $100,000 today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cannot argue with that math. And that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, yeah. Bill Parsons didn't take advantage of his position in this way, though, but he did moonlight foreclosing homes and repossessing property. They would hire off-duty cops to come in and kick people out of their houses if they couldn't pay their mortgage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a tough job.
Yeah. And that's the job that was available to him because he wasn't making much as a cop. So.
For sure.
Prohibition had been lifted, but it was still illegal in Washington to sell liquor by the glass. So you could buy a bottle of booze, but you couldn't go to a bar and buy a glass of booze because saloons and bars were dangerous places that they didn't want people carousing and whatnot.
Yeah.
So you get loaded at home.
For sure. Do that. And it's just like marijuana now.
Yeah.
You can have it, but go do it on your own time.
Yeah, exactly. Or in the street because nobody fucking cares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was their situation with alcohol.
Well, there were speakeasies. So there were speakeasies that were kind of operating in this weird, it's legal to buy alcohol, but it's not illegal to sell it by the glass, but people want to go drink in a social setting. Right. So there were bars, but they were underground and illegal bars. And Parsons was taken under the wing of veteran patrolman Dan Manigan, who took Parsons around and showed him where to take bribes from those who ran the speakeasies, and Parsons resisted taking advantage of his position like this. So Parsons is working under Manigan now, but he's saying, I don't want to take bribes. Manigan also regularly broke into businesses on his beat. He worked 12 to 8 a.m. and would steal food and money, then share it with his fellow cops back at the station.
Okay, so now we've got the bad cop.
This story is full of bad cops, so there's more to come. But yeah, that's just so mind-boggling to me. Like, I get the bribes and the kickbacks and all that stuff, but he's just breaking into people's businesses and stealing from them. And he's got a badge, so he can do it.
For sure, but he's sharing with the other officers, so he's not all bad.
Yeah.
not just hoarding it.
No, yeah. He's generous. He's generous with the other people he's committing crimes with.
Of course.
Parsons didn't like this, but was afraid to become a snitch. He did not go along and enjoy the ill-begotten fruits of the other cops' labor, but resisted it as long as he could, until eventually he gave in and started accepting bribes from bootleggers to look the other way. So Parsons does actually start taking bribes. From there, it's a slippery slope.
Right. I've seen enough movies to know that you can't be the clean cop around all the dirty cops.
Yeah.
They're
One
gonna take matters into their own hands.
One bad apple can spoil the entire college tuition.
Yeah.
A cop who had no problem taking a bribe or two was William Harrison Hacker Cox. Quote-unquote Hacker was his nickname. He had been arrested for bootlegging shortly after taking his civil service exam and was waiting to be hired by the police department. He gave a fake name when he was arrested for bootlegging, and a few months later when he was being inducted into the police department, he said he'd never been arrested. So many of the cops knew his secret, but looked the other way. So this is just a notoriously corrupt police department.
For sure.
They don't give a fuck about nothing.
Yeah, but now maybe they've got leverage over him.
Yeah, exactly. Now they have dirt on him, so now they can make him do whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know. One of the most senior and corrupt cops on the force was Detective Clyde Ralston. He was 6'3" inches tall, with a 54-inch chest. He was physically intimidating and had dirt on everyone, and despite living on a meager cop's salary, he always had tailored suits and a new car.
Wow. And that's at least 6'3" in today's height.
That's 6'3" inches, yeah.
People were shorter back then, so it's
Yeah.
the same sort of deal.
That's like 2 meters in today's. A little over 2 meters.
Who even knows how tall that is?
Nobody. Maybe Europeans. I don't know.
There's no way to know for sure.
No, exactly. It's been lost to time. Maybe you'd find a professor that speaks Sanskrit and knows what metric is, but yeah.
Yeah. And tailored suits, that's great.
Yeah. it's nice. You gotta look good.
For sure.
Clyde Ralston nearly beat his son-in-law to death for no other reason than that he didn't like him. And he walked away a free man. He didn't like his son-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's...
Yep.
I take back what I said about the suits.
Oh, yeah. September of 1935 was September of 1935 was unseasonably warm in Spokane. The temperature hovering in the upper 90s. The main hangouts of officers at Spokane at the time was the 24-hour diner called Mother's Kitchen on Riverside Avenue. It was owned and run by a bootlegger and former cattle rustler Virgil A. Birch. So we got the bootlegger cattle rustler who runs this restaurant that all of the cops hang out at. Because if you're going to dive into the underworld, fucking dive. Birch and Detective Ralston were close friends and black market business associates who shared a hunting cabin together. At Mother's Kitchen, Birch employed far more waitresses than he needed to service his diner, and he would sometimes brag he had 99 of the most beautiful women in Spokane on his payroll. This is because the waitresses doubled as prostitutes. So it's a diner/brothel where cops hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dirty cops that are friends and share hunting cabins with
with ne'er-do-wells and roustabouts.
It's quite a tangled web that Spokane leads.
It is, yeah. An unsavory character who hung out at Mother's Kitchen was A.C. Logan. He had been to prison 5 times and was covered in tattoos. These are 1930s tattoos, when nobody had tattoos,
for sure.
Except for prisoners.
In today's tattoos,
that's
just a couple sleeves.
That's like a face tattoo in today's tattoo.
Yeah, absolutely.
An arm tattoo to a face tattoo.
That's a great point.
Face tattoos now are going to be like, I don't know, decapitation head jar.
Who knows what the future holds?
I don't.
For body fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is... I don't condone what's happening with these men, but it's a wild cast of characters.
It is, yeah.
I'd love to see this spun into some sort of HBO series.
Yeah. It's the dark days of the Great Depression when everybody's just corrupt as fuck and going out for themselves. Even in the darkest days of the Depression, and with butter a scarce luxury, the restaurant never ran out. Birch let it be known to other restaurants in the area that if they ever needed creamery products, he was really willing to sell some of his. 2,000 pounds of butter stolen from creameries around the area moved through Mother's Kitchen in 1935, but by the end of summer, the supply had run dry. So they're robbing creameries.
2,000 pounds, and then just going through that in the summer.
Yep.
It's a lot of butter.
That's a lot of butter.
I think. I don't know, actually, how much butter a restaurant goes through.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm not sure.
In a hot summer.
I doubt it's like it is now where you get bread and then they send you just like, here, have a dish of butter with that bread.
Oh,
it's probably like, do you want butter for a lot of money in addition to, yeah.
$3 in today's dollars. Why do you keep saying today's dollars?
Because it's the present.
Someone's going to talk about this someday.
Yeah. And I want to be quoted accurately and have it put into the proper context.
Of course.
Birch knew of a creamery in the small town of Newport on the Washington-Idaho border, about 47 miles north of Spokane. Farmers from the surrounding area who were able to feed their cows brought their milk there. Newport was a dying mining town that had 1,400 people living in it. It had no restaurants or gas stations, but it did have a bar, Kelly's Tavern, where you could wrestle a live black bear.
Okay, so this bar, are we still allowed to serve beer at this point, or no alcohol of any sort in glasses?
Oh, I think you can serve beer at this point, but I don't think you can serve liquor. But I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a tavern where you can go in and they have a black bear in a cage, and you can wrestle the black bear.
Oh, poor bear.
Poor. Yeah, that's not a good life for a bear.
No, I'm not sure he had trouble with any of the patrons though, as a wrestling wise.
Well,
was a baby black bear.
I don't know. I think you could probably take it, but you don't want to fight all the time.
For sure.
You're a bear. You just want to be out there in the woods eating salmon and living your bear life.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Could you imagine if you had to hang out in a bar and wrestle people whenever they wanted?
I can imagine that, and you're right. It's no life.
Yeah.
No life for me.
No life for you.
life for a bear.
Ralston, Birch, and Logan hatched a plan to rob the Newport Creamery. So Detective Rolfin, 6'3" guy, Birch, who was the owner of Mother's Tavern, and Logan, who was the guy with the tattoos, decide that they are going to rob the Newport Creamery.
Oh boy.
Newport Marshal George Conniff was 53 years old. So the Marshal of Newport, 53 years old, he was 2 weeks away from retirement.
Oh boy. You don't say that.
Yeah. Not a good sign going into
And then he retired happily.
Yeah.
And nothing happened.
2 weeks away from retirement and planned to move to a remote cabin he had spent years building.
Good.
So he didn't want to really be a cop. He just came back to being a cop. He wanted to live out in the woods with his family, live this secluded life away from civilization. But he's like, all right, I'll work for a cop for a couple of years in Newport.
One last gig,
and then I'm out. I have to keep having to go down to Kelly's Tavern to stop people from wrestling a bear.
I got a cushy job protecting a creamery.
Yeah.
What could go down there?
Nothing's going to go bad. Who would rob a creamery? One of his main jobs was to guard the creamery, which he made a turnaround every night. Since there was such a massive food shortage, creameries were known to be targets, and his predecessor had been beaten and nearly killed in a previous robbery of the same creamery.
Wow, so definitely not a cushy job.
No. Sounds like a cushy job, but not really at this point. September 14th, 1935, the three robbers pulled into Newport at 9:30 p.m. The car, driven by Parsons, backed into an alley near the entrance to the creamery. They picked the lock, or it wasn't driven by Parsons, sorry, it was driven by Logan. Yeah, backed into an alley near the entrance to the creamery. They picked the lock and entered the refrigerated room and loaded out hundreds of pounds of fresh butter, cottage cheese, and cream. As they closed the door, the squeaking of the hinges and the sound of their feet on the gravel drew the attention of Marshal Conniff. He drew his flashlight and pointed at the noise and asked, "Who's there?" He saw the robbers and reached for his gun, but it was too late. Ralston took out his police-issue .32 caliber revolver and shot him 4 times. The men then left him in a pool of blood. The gunshots attracted a few nearby residents who got him to the hospital, but he died 10 hours later.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. So he didn't get to retire.
No, he didn't.
No.
I had a few so before we said all the serious stuff about the guy dying,
Yeah.
I just had a funny image of when they're stealing butter from the refrigerated room. Mm-hmm. It's in sacks, like money sacks, with a dollar sign on it, but it's got a picture of a cow on it.
Yeah.
That's pleasant. And the other thing I was thinking was, how do we know all the details of the story? But then you said that he died 10 hours later.
He died 10 hours later, yeah.
He's probably able to tell his story.
Yeah. Mm.
So that's good, but...
The news traveled fast, and roadblocks between Newport and Spokane were set up, as well as roadblocks to the east into Idaho, and they were the only 2 ways out of Newport. So there's only 2 roads out of Newport, they set up roadblocks on each of them. A police officer had been shot, and cops from all over eastern Washington were joining in the manhunt. Ralston drove up to the roadblock on the way to Spokane, flashed his police ID, and got through without incident.
Oh, mother.
Because he's a cop.
Fucking cops.
And he's like, I'm a cop. I'm,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The perfect ring.
Really? It really is.
You need that inside guy. And
Mm-hmm.
he's in a well-tailored suit. I mean, who's going to
Yeah, he looks good. He's got a badge. He's just driving along. He's like, I'm going to be participating in this manhunt, looking for the quote-unquote real perpetrators of this robbery.
I want him to wrestle the black bear.
Yeah, me too. I want that black bear to this be like the straw that broke the black bear's back. Just like, fuck this, I'm going full-on bear on you. Yeah. News traveled fast in roadblocks between Spokane. So the case was assigned to Elmer Black, sheriff of Pend Oreille County, and lab results showed that the bullets used to kill Conniff came from a .32 caliber revolver. So they knew it was from a .32. But the investigation didn't bother Ralston or Logan, who continued to hang out at Mother's Kitchen. But Birch, the owner of Mother's Kitchen, was getting nervous. Not nervous enough to stop fencing black market butter through. Logan robbed several more creameries in the second half of September, and all the goods were run through Birch's establishment. Which is a string of creamery robberies happening in the summer of 1935.
Yikes. And there's a creamery manhunt out, and he's nervous, but he's like, oh, not so nervous, I'm not still going to make a buck.
That's true, yeah. Gotta make that money, somehow. Logan was picked up by local authorities in a stolen car in Spokane. He didn't have any illicit cream, but he and an accomplice had 2 guns in the car, one a .32 caliber revolver, as well as butter wrappers and dozens of new shoes.
I have to laugh at the words illicit cream.
Illicit cream,
and there's just butter wrappers all over.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't me, he's got butter all over his face.
Mm-hmm.
I swear.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't do it.
Like when they catch the guys that are huffing paint and their faces are covered in paint. It's like that, but butter. And he's holding a stick of butter. Caught greasy-handed.
Biting a stick of butter.
Oh, God. That's what you do when you're rich.
When you're
in
rich,
the Great Depression,
then, you just took big bites of butter. Now it's frowned upon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was arrested by Detective Charles Sonnabend. The guns were sent to FBI headquarters for investigation and to see if the .32 found was the .32 used to kill Conniff. Law enforcement was sure they had found their men and took turns beating the suspects.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So remember, Logan knows who killed Conniff, but he's not admitting to it. So Logan didn't confess to the murder, but demanded to see Clyde Ralston, who did kill Conniff, and who was the detective who was there. Mm-hmm. Ralston and Birch dumped all the illegal cream products they had and made sure there was nothing illegal in Mother's Kitchen, because they're worried Logan's going to turn on him. When Detective Sonnabend told Ralston that Logan wanted to see him, he acted surprised and declined to go see the suspect. So he said, he's probably asking for me because I arrested him a while back for blah, 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 but no, I'm not going to go see. But inside, he's secretly shitting his pants because this guy who was,
And it's maybe not well known at this point that they're known associates.
No, it's
He
not.
hangs out a lot and that they have a hunting lodge.
Well, he and Ralston and Birch had a hunting lodge, and AC Logan is just an ex-con who they brought in with this. They're not really buddies. Mm-hmm. They're just kind of like, oh, well, we're going to commit this robbery. This guy is a seasoned criminal. We're going to bring him on to help us out.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
and then throw him under the bus when it makes sense.
Yeah. Ralston knew he had to get rid of his .32 revolver, because it's his police-issue .32 revolver that he used to kill Conniff. So Ralston contacted Dan Manigan, remember, who Parson from the beginning of the story, Parson's partner, who would break into places, who was known to regularly break into buildings on his patrol. And Ralston asked Manigan to throw a package off of the Post Street Bridge into the Spokane River. So he said, here's this package, throw it off the bridge into the river, get rid of this thing. So Bill Parsons, who was partnered with Manigan that night, was confused when he saw Manigan step out of the car with a strange package and throw it into the water below. So they're together when they do this, and he throws it into the water, and he's like, what the fuck was that? Manigan thought he could trust Parsons because he had started taking kickbacks from bootleggers, but Parsons was still trying to be a good cop. So he's corrupt, but he's a little corrupt. He's not full on, I'm going to kill people. He's like, I'll take a couple of bucks to look the other way because prohibition is bullshit, which is what a lot of people thought at the time.
Yeah.
So I'll take some money and look the other way, take advantage of it.
That makes sense. And I will say, at this point, knowing what I know now, Manigan doesn't seem that bad.
No, he does. Didn't think the story was going to go in that direction.
No, I
did
was
it?
like, oh, okay, this guy's stealing, preventing free speech like everyone is, apparently.
Yeah.
But just sharing with his buddies all his goods.
Mm-hmm. After Manigan threw the weapon in the river, Parsons asked him what he had just done, and Manigan responded, "We threw a gun in the river." And Parsons asked, "We?" And he replied, "Yes, you and me."
Oh, boy.
I'm like, you're in this now. You're a part of this. So Parsons contacted the FBI, thinking that this might have something to do with the Conniff case, and the FBI told him to leave it alone.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
How high up does this go?
It goes all the way up to President Roosevelt.
Freaking A.
Yeah. Charles Sonnabed learned from a rookie officer who had overheard some things that he wasn't supposed to hear that Ralston had leaked information about the creamery robberies and was the ringleader. So he's hearing that Ralston is the actual guy who was robbing the creameries. So Sonnabed went to the police chief, who told him to leave it alone. A cop shooting another cop in a robbery would irreparably damage the reputation of the police force.
Yeah, way worse than a cover-up at all levels by all police.
Yeah, and the FBI. But yeah, just like, that's just such a bizarre... I mean, I guess it makes sense in its internal way of, well, we don't want anybody to find out about this because then no one will trust the police. But who the fuck is going to trust this police force?
Yeah,
This is
real.
I'm sure they're all out there like, no, there's no crimes being committed by the police officers. It's all just rumors and hearsay and conjecture by these vagrants we're arresting.
Cover-up is always worse than the crime.
Yeah, but just notoriously corrupt. Just
Absolutely.
incredibly.
I mean, if you think about it in today's corruption, that would be so much corruption. So it's hard to even fathom.
Yeah, what is it, like multiply it by 10 and that's the level of corruption it'd be today?
Rule of 7.
Yeah, exactly. Metric, conversion. Yeah. So Logan was remanded to federal authorities and pleaded down to 4 years at McNeil Island Penitentiary since there was no hard evidence connecting him to the murder. Bill Parsons would serve on the police force for another 35 years and retire as chief of police.
Oh, wow.
It was all the way to the chief. Dan Manigan stayed on the force until 1946 when he was forced to resign after almost killing his wife in a domestic violence incident. So Manigan maybe is the biggest criminal. It's hard. They're all pretty bad.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
Shades of gray.
Yeah. Virgil Birch sold Mother's Kitchen and moved to Portland, Oregon. Clyde Ralston was demoted from detective to patrolman for leaking information regarding a case, and he resigned from the police department a year later. The case went cold, and the murder was considered unsolved. 50 years later,
Ooh, delicious.
Gonzaga University graduate student and sheriff of Penoreal County, Tony Bamonte, decided to look into the case as part of his master's thesis. So this is the 1980s now. March 22nd, 1989, suspecting Ralston was in fact the gunman, contacted the Spokane Police Department, who said they had no record of any of the men involved in the case. Ooh. So they have no record that Ralston was a police officer, no record that Manigan was, no record that Parsons was. All of these records have been thrown out.
That seems real fishy.
Real fishy, yeah. So massive cover-up happened. Word that he was investigating the case made its way around, and some of the men involved were still alive. So Dan Manigan, now 86, said, quote, "I knew Ralston fairly good. I knew he was into something, I didn't know what. I heard that he was involved in the creamery burglaries and that he was peddling. I never had much contact with Ralston, but he hung around with some shady characters. He was always mixed up in some dairy business in the cafe."
Some dairy business. Again.
That's what we need to start calling, like, shady dealings. Like,
sure.
Oh, those kids down on the corner, they're up to some dairy business down there.
Boy, it's never not funny. Just food plus
Yeah, right.
shady connotations.
You're such a weird... Black market butter is such a weird thing to exist.
I was getting into some sugar.
Yeah. Like the episode of The Simpsons where Homer steals all the shit. Yeah. He said he always suspected the gun he got rid of was the murder weapon and had been on his mind ever since he threw it in the river. So it's been eating away at him for the last 50 years. April of 1989, 85-year-old Pearl Koch, I don't know how to say this, but K-E-O-G-H, Koch, who worked at Mother's Kitchen, told Bamonte she had gone to the police with evidence that Ralston was involved in the murder, but was told to stay out of it. So more people with information, and the police are saying, we'll handle it, stay out of this.
Just top-notch police work.
Seriously, yeah.
Stay out of it.
Yeah. Birch had bragged to her in the 1940s about being with Ralston when he shot Conniff, and that when they passed through the roadblock, he was hiding under the tarp in the back seat.
Yeah.
She also handled butter with Newport Creamery wrappers on it, and Ralston had bragged to her about shooting Conniff. August 22nd, 1989. The Washington Water Power Company ordered an inspection of the dams in the Spokane River, and the inspection required shutting down the water flow and draining the riverbed. On the occasion, Beaumonte was able to walk out on the dried river and in 10 minutes found the corroded .32 caliber revolver right where Manigan said he had dropped it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So didn't move at all in the stream.
Well,
it's
deep water and it's metal, so it's just going to sink and then it's just going to stay there on the rock bed at the bottom of the river.
That's satisfying. That's
Yeah.
a 10-minute search.
That's crazy that after 50 years he was able to find the gun, the murder weapon that's been at the bottom of the river the entire time. The Washington Crime Laboratory confirmed that the weapon was a .32 revolver and that the corrosion was consistent with being underwater for 50 years. Ralston was still alive at this point, and he was living in St. Ignatius, Montana. And so Beaumonte contacted him, and Ralston died on January 23rd, 1990, and everybody in St. Ignatius thought that Beaumonte had hounded an old man to death.
Oh, wow.
Because he was accused, but he died a free man, January 23rd, 1990.
Yeah, there's got to be a statute of limitations on that.
I don't think there was on murder.
Oh, yeah.
On murder? Yeah, I don't think so.
Sense.
But it would be really hard to retry, and it would be really hard because it happened so long ago, and it would be really hard to bring that up again. Also, you couldn't prove that the .32 that was actually found in the river was the .32 that shot him because it would have been corroded so much you wouldn't have been able to run those tests anymore.
For sure.
Yeah.
The perfect crime.
But after 50 years, they were able to prove that Ralston was actually the murderer.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's insane. This is totally separate, but it reminds me of, I was just in Stockholm in Sweden, and there was this big boat on its maiden voyage, 10 minutes into sailing, it sunk in its own harbor because it was too top heavy.
Oh, God, yeah.
And it sunk into the mud, and 400 years later, in the 60s, they excavated it, and there's this whole museum built around it.
Oh, really?
And it's fully preserved.
Oh, that's
from
cool.
the 1600s.
That sounds real cool.
Yeah, it's this amazing thing, and so this is like that, but just a little bit shorter time period and with a gun.
Yeah.
And a crazy story.
Yeah. So the creamery robberies, because butter was such a precious commodity back then. I guess anything there's a shortage of that people like, they're willing to pay top dollar for if they have it. But people were willing to kill for butter.
Yeah. That's insane that you get caught stealing butter.
Yeah.
And you're like, I just have to kill this person.
Yeah.
That is easier to deal with than being caught greasy-handed or whatever you would say when you're stealing butter.
Yeah, it's just such and this story of just police corruption, just an incredibly notoriously corrupt police force in Spokane. There's a book about this called Breaking Blue by Timothy Egan, and it is great. I highly recommend it. It's all about the actual police graft that was happening in Spokane at the time, and then the second half of the book is all about the modern investigation into what happened in the more contemporary age.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, notorious police corruption, black market butter, guy 2 weeks away from retirement.
It has it all. And the guy who, the guy who went along with it reluctantly but had a good heart ended up being police chief.
Yeah.
And he, won the day.
Yep.
Supposedly.
Yeah, I don't really know what happened to him after that. If he continued down the straight and narrow, if he took the other path down to becoming a more corrupt police officer.
Police chief.
Yeah.
At least he was at the top.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to the Seattle Files. Thank you so much, Michael, for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
And if you have a topic suggestion you would like to hear an episode about, shoot me an email at theseattlefiles@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook, subscribe and rate in iTunes. We are also on Twitter at the Seattle Files, and I never update it. So if you want just one more person to follow on Twitter that never posts anything, check out at the Seattle Files. If you want to become a supporter of the Seattle Files, find us at patreon.com/the Seattle Files. Thank you for listening. Be back next week with a new topic and a new guest. 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 New topic and a new guest.